So this is Acts chapter 15, the scripture for June 5th. Acts 15 narrates the first large-scale church council. You may have heard of church councils like the Council of Nicaea or the Council of Constantinople. This council at Jerusalem was probably the first large-scale church council to deal with a controversial issue. The topic in question regards the full inclusion of Gentiles into the church. Now, there were some believers that thought that Gentiles should become Jews fully before they could convert to Christianity. Essentially, that Christianity was a smaller circle within the larger Jewish umbrella. Messianic Judaism, you could think of it as. The consequences of this council, regardless of what was decided, would be consequences echoing throughout the centuries, as we've seen. By allowing the Gentiles to maintain their own particular cultures while also believing in Jesus Christ, the council ensured the flexibility and also the transcultural nature of faith in Jesus Christ. That you don't need to be a Jew or practice Jewish customs in order to be a faithful Christian. They also named, at this early stage, the need for justification by faith, not through the law. Perhaps this counsel was on Paul's mind when he wrote the second and third chapters of Galatians in his famous creed that justification is by faith alone. Now, this is also the last time that we see the Apostle Peter speaking in the book of Acts. The same man who just 5 chapters ago insisted, "I will not touch any unclean thing." He now advocates for Gentiles to have freedom from the laws of Moses, which is an incredible turnaround. When we experience God working in those that we had counted as enemies or as outsiders to the faith, I think it forces us and it causes us to reevaluate our own assumptions about theology, about who is in and who is out. Peter's testimony, along with Paul's and Barnabas' testimony from Antioch, leads to this decision by James, who is the leader of the early church, probably Jesus' brother, is what scholars believe. And this isn't the same James, of course, as James, son of Zebedee, who the Romans had killed just a few chapters ago. So James, the head of this Jerusalem church, decides to ask Gentiles only to avoid sexual immorality, idolatry, eating strangled things, or consuming blood. And of those, 3 of them I think make good sense. No idolatry because we only worship God. No sexual immorality because God's concerned about both body and soul. And no eating blood because blood is considered the life force of an animal and was considered special. That's why we have these understandings of Jesus' blood has never failed me yet. That's why during Passover they painted on the threshold of their doors with the blood of a lamb. The one thing that doesn't quite fit there is this strangulation of animals. What's going on? Well, thinking about the type of person who would strangle an animal, this is a particularly painful and horrifying way for animals to die. And now I'm not a herdsman or an animal husbandman, and so if there's somebody who knows something I don't about strangulation, I'd love to hear more about it. But it seems to be a particularly unhumane way to kill animals. In addition, if you strangle an animal, you're not spilling their blood. So because of that, because there was this condemnation of eating blood, I think that those were sort of the things in mind when they said, no eating strangled animals. So after this decision, the Jerusalem Council sends Paul, Barnabas, Silas, and this guy we've encountered once before, Judas called Barsabbas. This Judas called Barsabbas was the other frontrunner along with Matthias to replace Judas Iscariot in Acts chapter 1 among the apostles. And the Jerusalem Council sends all of them off to Antioch. And after spreading this good news of the council's decision in Antioch, Paul feels compelled to revisit some of the churches that he visited before with Barnabas. But he doesn't want to bring John Mark because John Mark abandoned them when they were going and visiting churches this first time. So Barnabas sets out with John Mark and does their stuff down in Cyprus, I believe, and Paul takes Silas with them, which leaves Judas at the church in Antioch. And thanks be to God that somebody who was considered worthy of being an apostle could help lead this church in Antioch. Tradition suggests that John Mark and Peter would later be imprisoned, and that the Gospel of Mark was scribed by John Mark based on Peter's memories. But we don't hear again from John Mark either. Now I wonder, in light of the Jerusalem Council, how does your church make controversial decisions? That's all for Acts chapter 15. On Monday, the 8th of June, we'll be looking at Acts chapter 16. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.